Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for giving up time at the end of a long day to come and hear a little bit more about our framework. My name is Helen Matthews. I'm one of His Majesty's inspectors, and I'm Deputy Director responsible for inspection improvement at Ofsted. And I'm joined today by John Lucas, also one of His Majesty's inspectors, and Senior HMI in my team, my inspection improvement team. And I'm also joined by Eleanor Belfield, who is also one of His Majesty's inspectors and senior HMI within the inspection improvement team. So thank you for joining us. I can see that some of you have already found the question bar. Please do put your questions in there. We've also received some questions prior to today, and we're hoping at the end of this presentation to answer some of those questions if we don't throughout the presentation. Let's move on to our first slide. What we're going to do, colleagues, is we're going to go off camera now so that you can concentrate on the slides. So you'll hopefully be able to hear us, but not see us. Okay, on the screen in front of you, you will see an outline of today's session. And what we're going to try to do this afternoon is take you through changes in our approach, what that means for you, and how we're going to actually implement this in the autumn term onwards. Now, we're determined to raise standards and improve lives for all children, but especially for those who are disadvantaged or vulnerable, who we're going to put at the heart of this new framework. We know that our work is valued by children, parents, carers, and decision makers, but we also know we need to reset our relationship with the sectors that we inspect and those that we regulate. So last year, the Big Listen, we heard from many thousands of parents and professionals whose feedback has helped us to make changes to the way we work. And this year, we consulted on a new approach to inspecting education providers from this autumn. And this includes introducing a new look Ofsted report card for parents and carers, for example. This afternoon, we're going to be sharing what we'll be making from November and what they mean for schools, in particular for secondary schools, primary, special, alternative provision, and maintained nursery schools. And we've had, as I said at the beginning, we've had quite a few questions from you prior to this webinar, and we're hoping that either through the session or at the end of the session, we'll be able to answer some of those questions. Okay, we're going to move on to the next slide, hopefully. Okay, collectively, we all want to achieve the following. Every one of us has a desire to work for all pupils, children and learners, apprentices and trainees, to receive a high quality of education and training, an education that enables everyone to achieve, belong and thrive. And you'll hear more of those words as we go through this presentation today. And of course, ultimately, to achieve great outcomes. This is about raising standards because, you know, we all firmly agree, don't we, that children get one childhood and we will continue to put them first. We want great outcomes for all of our children, and if we get it right for the most vulnerable, we get it right for all. And many of you may have heard Martin say that on podiums around the country. And for the first time, inclusion will be the focus on every single inspection. Parents have told us that they want better and more detailed information about where their child's school, nursery or college, with strengths and areas for improvement highlighted. And we definitely want to celebrate a school's strengths. We want to validate what leaders are telling us about their school and work with leaders to highlight what needs developing further. And we remain fully committed to improving how it feels to be inspected while continuing to encourage and support providers to raise standards. We do not expect any provider to be doing more than it needs to just for the sake of an Ofsted inspection. The inspection toolkit is based on statutory duties and guidance, non-statutory guidance, professional standards, research and inspection evidence. and we are committed to working with leaders to determine the areas of inspection focus and agree the most appropriate activities tailored to that specific provider. So let's have a look at our journey so far. Last year's Big Listen, we set out our ambition to reset relationships with the professionals we inspect and regulate while maintaining the confidence of children, parents and carers. This included renewing the education inspection framework and introducing some new report cards. In February 2025, our 12-week consultation set out a series of proposals for change, and that covered early years, state-funded schools, non-association independent schools, further education and skills, and IT providers. We had over 6,500 responses, alongside insights from various focus groups, expert discussions, test visits, and independent research. So today's changes are grounded in that rich evidence. Alongside our consultation response, which you'll find on gov.uk, we've published updated inspection toolkits and operating guides that reflect a more empathetic, child-focused approach, especially for those who are disadvantaged or vulnerable, whilst making sure we don't lose sight of our core purpose and our collective drive to raise standards. The reforms will come into effect in November 2025 for early years, state-funded schools and further education colleges, and they'll come into effect for ITE and independent schools in January 26. So our proposals were not set in stone. We have carefully listened to all of the feedback from the consultation, and we have further tested and refined our methodology. We believe our new approach represents the right balance between the interests of parents and children and the wishes of education professionals. Our core purpose and driving mission is to keep children and learners safe and improve their lives. So let me just take you through some of the key changes. Firstly, a new inspection report card to highlight excellence and identify areas for improvement, driving high standards. The report card will provide much more nuance for parents and providers, combining an at-a-glance grade with narrative summaries of strengths and areas for improvement. And following extensive feedback and user testing of February's proposed version, the report card has actually been redesigned to make it much more accessible, particularly on mobile devices, as we know they are the most common way that people access inspection reports. We've introduced a new 5-point grading scale so that we can set high expectations while encouraging improvement where it is needed. And in response to feedback from professionals and parents about the proposed terminology, the final set of grades have changed to urgent improvement, needs attention, the expected standard, strong standard, and exceptional, to identify where the very best provision in the country is, which is a change from the initial proposals. Providers will not be asked now to submit cases for approval to be exceptional or to be graded as exceptional. Instead, inspectors will evaluate exceptional practice by applying the toolkit, subject to the usual quality assurance and consistency checking. A renewed focus on inclusion by introducing a new inclusion evaluation area to help break down barriers to learning and well-being. Inspectors will evaluate whether education providers are providing high-quality support for all children and learners, especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds, those who have SEND, those who are known to children's social care. We've also introduced new inspection toolkits for grading providers, and the toolkits show you and inspectors the evaluation areas that we'll focus on and how we'll assess and grade providers. Evaluation areas than in our current methodology, but following feedback from our consultation, the number of core evaluation areas has been streamlined. For instance, in response to feedback, the definitions of grades have been tightened to more clearly differentiate between them, and the standards in the toolkits have been slimmed down to provide greater clarity on the evidence inspectors will assess. There's a new inspection methodology designed to reduce workload for the education workforce. Much of our inspection methodology comprises of inspection activities you'll already be very familiar with, such as speaking with parents and pupils and visiting lessons. The toolkits are designed to assess the professional standards, statutory and non-statutory requirements already placed on schools. New operating guides set out the times at which inspectors can arrive on site and the suggested latest times they should be departing to cap the length of inspection days. And we will evaluate providers' work to support and promote leader and staff well-being. This will be considered as part of the leadership and governance evaluation area. Inspection findings will be grounded in a clear understanding of each provider's unique circumstances. And the new operating guide set out how leaders and inspectors will reflect on this provider's unique context and unique set of priorities. There's going to be a new online insights platform called Ofsted Explore an Area, giving parents key information about the education and care services in their local area. And a new system for monitoring schools where improvement is needed to offer reassurance to parents and carers. These inspections will allow providers to improve their needs attention grades in a timely fashion and have improvements recognised much more quickly than previously. To drive consistent and fair inspections, school and independent schools will be led by full-time His Majesty's inspectors. These very experienced inspectors will oversee the inspection, building a professional relationship with the leaders, including any nominee, to deliver a more collaborative experience. In addition, Ofsted will introduce a programme of work to assess consistency in school inspections, including having a senior inspector shadow a sample of live inspections to guide and advise the inspection team where appropriate. Post-inspection, any initial differences between the senior inspector and the team will be analysed. And finally, increased resource and training for inspection teams will drive consistency and quality. An additional school inspector will add capacity to the team, allowing the lead inspector to spend more time with leaders, including any nominee, as well as overseeing and quality assuring the inspection. Thank you, colleagues. I'm going to hand over to John, who's going to take you through the next set of slides.
Thank you, Helen, and good afternoon, everybody. Let's look in more detail at our new approach, and we'll begin with an overview. Looking at the top row from left to right, we will put children and pupils first, breaking barriers down by raising standards up, especially for the most disadvantaged and vulnerable. We'll improve the way we report the content of inspection findings to parents and carers, and will improve the look and feel of inspection for education providers and professionals with a more collaborative approach. And will maintain our focus on having care and concern for the well-being and workload of those we inspect. And moving to the bottom row, we'll take context into greater account on inspection. We will make inspections consistent in approach and continue to improve our process for allowing leaders to raise any issues about their inspection. And we'll provide constructive advice to improve based upon conversations with leaders. And finally, different by design, we've further tailored our inspection approach to each remit and provision type within them. For example, we've worked to align regulation and inspection standards in early years. So now to inclusion. And as I've said, we'll put children and pupils first, breaking down barriers by raising standards, especially for the disadvantaged and vulnerable. This is why we're introducing separate inclusion evaluation area, and inclusion will also be a key theme across other evaluation areas. Our inspections will look at how schools are addressing barriers to learning for all pupils. We will always start with those the government asks schools to focus on, whether through statutory obligations or non-statutory guidance. This is why we're particularly emphasising those from socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds, those with SEND, and those known or previously known to children's social care. We will also evaluate how well schools ensure there is high quality support for all pupils who may face other barriers to their learning and or well-being. As part of understanding the barriers most relevant to a school, inspectors will make use of demographic data to understand a school's cohort. Crucially, they will speak with leaders to understand the context in which the school is working and the particular barriers their pupils face. And as inspectors form their evaluation of the inclusion evaluation area, they will consider the systems and processes that leaders put in place to identify the needs of pupils at their school and to address and review the support that they receive. In addition to that, each area of the toolkit will have a focus on those pupils who face the greatest barriers to ensure that things are working well for all pupils, be that in curriculum and teaching, the school's practice around attendance and behaviour, or personal development and well-being. And when we talk about a strengthened focus on inclusion, we're talking about how inspectors will gather evidence in a rounded and meaningful way. This is not about one-off checks. It's about understanding how leaders support every pupil, especially those who face barriers to learning and/or well-being. Let me draw your attention to that third bullet, case sampling. This is a form of initial evidence gathering which helps us to understand the outcomes and experiences of pupils who face barriers. It involves selecting a small sample of pupils and tracking them across inspection activities to gain a deeper understanding of their experiences and outcomes. This is then connected to wider evidence about the experiences and outcomes for all pupils. And to be clear, case sampling is not the same as a case study. We do not ask or require any staff to prepare case studies for an inspection. And finally, inspectors will go on learning walks with you, leaders. These are opportunities to evaluate inclusion in action across classrooms and subjects, connecting what leaders tell us with what pupils are experiencing on a day-to-day basis. By combining these approaches, inspectors will build a picture that is fair, is evidence-based, and rooted in the reality of each school's context. And as a reminder, in response to what we heard in the consultation, we have reduced the number of evaluation areas from those we initially proposed. The evaluation areas are now those you see on screen. You will see that attendance and behaviour now form one evaluation area, and curriculum and teaching form one evaluation area. Our toolkits show providers and inspectors the evaluation areas we'll focus on, and within them, the standards we will evaluate to inform grading. The toolkit is not a checklist. It's used to guide conversations, reflect on evidence, and make sure grades reflect the evidence gathered. It supports a shared understanding and discussion of the strengths of the school, its context, and areas for further exploration. Inspectors will apply the toolkit areas, themes, and standards, tailoring activities to each school's context. And as we've said, nothing in the standards set out in the toolkit should add to a school's workload, nor do we expect schools to have completed any formal self-evaluation. However, you may wish to use the toolkit to support continuing improvement, and we will expect leaders to share their strengths, successes, and priorities with us. We've carefully reflected on evaluation areas in our consultation and how these should apply for different remits. So now looking at the toolkit, there's a covering page for each evaluation area, which includes a summative statement at the top. This is designed to help schools and inspectors to see at a glance what the evaluation area is about. There follows a statement to remind us that our grading standards are based on what schools are already required to do. As Sir Martin Oliver stated, the toolkit will make it clearer than we ever have that schools shouldn't be doing anything just for the days our inspectors come in. They shouldn't be spending a single minute or penny on anything that isn't in the best interests of your children. The toolkit then sets out the most significant contributory factors that underpin our approaches to evidence gathering and grading. This is very much based on the research that underpinned the Education Inspection Framework. We've been clear that our renewed framework will ensure there is consistency in inspection practice. We've also made sure that the toolkit is reflective of each remit and the differing phases and provider types within it. In our toolkit, we've included an explanation of how the toolkit should be applied in different school types. For example, in curriculum and teaching, inspectors will consider what practice looks like in the early years, in primary, in secondary, and in post-16. So in early years, we'll look at how well the youngest children are developing strong foundations, such as early communication, language, and number skills. In primary, the focus is on how well leaders ensure pupils build secure knowledge and skills across the curriculum, with reading and mathematics at the core. In secondary, inspectors will consider how the curriculum builds subject expertise and supports progression. While for post-16, we'll look at how well provision equips young people for the next stage of education, training, or work. In short, the toolkit seeks to make it clear how we'll apply each evaluation area in a school like yours, and what you can expect inspectors to be looking at in practice. And once we've set out what an evaluation area covers, the toolkit then moves into more detail about the kinds of evidence inspectors will gather. Each evaluation area considers themes, as you can see on the slide, and below that, prompts that guide inspectors' conversations and observations. Evaluation areas start with a theme about strategic leadership of that area and end with a theme about inclusive practices in that area. These prompts are not checklists for schools. They're there to help inspectors think about the right questions, to explore evidence in context, and to make sure our evaluations are consistent and they are fair. For example, in curriculum and teaching, inspectors will consider how well the curriculum is sequenced, or how teachers adapt their approaches for pupils with different starting points. In leadership, prompts will focus on how leaders set direction, monitor impact, and support development. So the key takeaway from this slide is that the toolkit makes inspection more transparent. Leaders can see the themes inspectors will explore and the types of questions that will help shape evidence gathering. And as we come to the next section, we can see that each evaluation area in the toolkit is graded on a 5-point scale. That is with the exception of safeguarding, which is met or not met. What you can see here are the grades we expect to see most often on inspection: needs attention, expected standard, and strong standard. The expected standard is in the middle. This is the baseline for inspection. It reflects what's required of schools and is the starting point for all inspections. This is why it's at the center of the page. We start each inspection with the premise that a school is meeting the inspected standard. Importantly, one clear distinction is that we'll be looking for a secure fit, not a best fit. That is, to meet the expected standard, a school will need to meet all of the standards in that column. To meet the strong standard, a school will need to meet all the standards in expected and in strong. You will see words such as typically and generally in the expected standard. This is to recognize that the expected standard is not about perfection. For example, a school might have a subject area that's being developed well, but does not yet quite meet the same standards as others consistently. So if that was the case, the school may still be graded as having a secure fit with the expected standard in the relevant evaluation areas. The needs attention column contains indicators and not standards. An evaluation area is likely to be needs attention when there is not a secure fit for the expected standard. Indicators in this column are designed to exemplify why a school might not be meeting the expected standard. These indicators are deliberately worded positively to acknowledge what leaders are doing, but pointing out that something needs attention as it's not a secure fit with the expected standard. We've said all along that we expect more schools to have varied grade profiles, including potentially areas that need attention. Sir Martin Oliver has often referenced the need for nuanced grading, stating that grades for specific evaluation areas will allow for a more detailed and representative assessment. Individual grading of the evaluation areas will enable parents and carers to see, in more detail, what's special about your school, what it does well and what you're working on. Lee Austin, our National Director, stated, "Needs attention is not a fail. It's a bit like if you take your car for an MOT and it passes but gets an advisory notice. If you don't pay attention to this, it could be a problem in the future." On the previous slide, we looked at the grades that inspectors will use most often. Here we're focusing on the two ends of the scale we expect to use much less frequently: urgent improvement and exceptional. Urgent improvement applies when the expected standards have clearly not been met, and where there are serious concerns about the impact of the school's work in the relevant evaluation area. The indicators explain what this might look like in practice. These are occasions when significant improvement is needed. At the other end of the scale is exceptional. This grade is for schools where evidence shows that standards are not only strong, but truly transformational. This means everything in the strong standard is already being met securely and consistently, and leaders are making a sustained difference for pupils. Both urgent improvement and exceptional are important parts of the 5-part scale, but they will be much less common in practice. The majority of evaluations will fall into the middle 3 grades that we looked at earlier. Eleanor.
Thank you, John. Let's remind ourselves of some of the key aspects underpinning our renewed approach. We are moving towards a more supportive, empathetic approach to inspections, in which the starting point will be expected standard. We will further take each provider's context into account, and we will adopt a more collaborative approach. We have extensively tested our inspection methodology revising our approach to make inspection feel a more collaborative process. We will be consistent in our approach to inspections and continue to improve our process for providers to feed back about their inspection experience. While no inspection will be the same, due to every school being different, we have ensured that inspectors will apply the inspection methodology consistently. And we will provide constructive advice to improve based on inspection evidence and our conversations with you, the leaders. And we will do all of this through a values-driven approach to inspections, that which is professional, empathetic, respectful, and courteous. The Ofsted Academy is running the largest package of training Ofsted has ever offered for an inspection launch to inspectors, alongside webinars like these and events for education professionals. So, over the next few slides, we will provide a broad overview of the inspection process. And before inspectors arrive, there are several steps that help get the inspection off to a smooth start. Some of this will feel familiar, but there are some important changes too. In preparing for the inspection, inspectors will review information such as published data, your website, and local authority information. Now, this preparation is not about catching schools out, but making sure that inspectors are able to engage with you during the inspection planning call to better understand your context and priorities. Inspectors' first contact is through the notification call. While this is still the moment you are formally told about the inspection, it is more than a quick announcement. Inspectors will use it to begin a constructive and professional dialogue, setting the tone for the whole inspection. They will ask about your context, check well-being, and agree a time for the planning call. Schools will be asked to nominate someone to act as the main link with the inspection team. We call them the nominee. They are to help with communication, logistics, and making sure that your context is properly understood. This role is not compulsory, and you are not disadvantaged if you choose not to have a nominee. There is optional training available for nominees to further support them in this role. The planning call that follows is a longer collaborative conversation. Inspectors will listen to leaders outline the school's context, successes, strengths, and priorities. And they will work with you to co-construct the day one timetable, confirm any reasonable adjustments, and discuss with you how evidence will be gathered. The aim is to make sure inspectors arrive already clear about your school's specific circumstances and the things that matter most in your school. So while the steps we have just gone through, some may sound familiar, but what has changed is the emphasis. More consideration of context from the very first phone call, and a more collaborative approach to shaping the inspection before inspectors arrive on site. Inspectors throughout the inspection and on day one will gather evidence to enable them to celebrate strengths in pupils' achievement, belonging, and ability to thrive, to validate leaders' priorities and progress, and to highlight priorities for improvement. Inspectors will start with a brief meeting with school leaders and, if requested, may speak with staff. The lead inspector will check the central record early on. The leaders will be able to walk their school with the lead HMI, and this is an important opportunity for leaders to show the lead inspector their context. First-hand evidence gathering with a strong focus on pupils' experiences begins early, particularly how pupils are included and kept safe. Inspectors will speak with pupils during lessons and social times, visit classrooms alongside leaders, and walk the school to connect leadership priorities with what pupils actually experience. These activities allow for ongoing professional dialogue between inspectors and leaders. And inspectors will look closely at how support is provided to pupils who may need extra help, using case sampling to understand how inclusion works in practice. This broad approach helps build a clear picture of how well the school supports pupils to achieve, to belong, and to thrive. Inspectors may carry laptops during their visits, but not always. And when they don't, they'll need time back in the team room to record their observations. There will be several opportunities for leaders and the nominee, where there is one, to meet with the inspection team to discuss emerging findings. The first of these reflection meetings typically takes place around lunchtime on day one. And these discussions promote open professional dialogue and allow for adjustments to the inspection plan based on what inspectors are seeing. The afternoon continues with further evidence gathering and focused leadership meetings, including one with the designated safeguarding lead. These meetings, planned in advance, help inspectors explore key areas such as inclusion and leadership in greater depth. And the day will end with a final reflection meeting between inspectors and leaders. Typically, inspectors will leave the site at 5 o'clock. Day 2 will start with a reflection meeting and will conclude with a grading meeting. Inspectors will gather evidence through inspection activities that have been confirmed at the end of day 1. There will be further learning walks and, where appropriate, case sampling in keeping with our focus on pupils who are disadvantaged, those with SEND, and those who are most vulnerable. Professional dialogue will continue throughout the day, rooted in the evidence that is being gathered and the inspection toolkit. These discussions will be ongoing through evidence gathering activities and in the reflection meetings between inspectors and leaders, including the nominee where the school has chosen to have one. And the final reflection meeting will be the formal grading meeting. This is when inspectors evaluate the evidence gathered, including that already shared and discussed at the previous reflection meetings. Provisional final grades will be determined based on a secure fit. And then this meeting will be followed by the final feedback meeting, in which those provisional grades, grounded in the evidence gathered, will be shared. This feedback will cover all the points that will appear in the written report card. So let's look a bit closer at what it means for secondary schools. And we know that secondary schools are often large, complex and evolving organisations. The planning call will be important for leaders to help the lead inspector understand the structure and organisation of the school. And we encourage you to have the key staff present for this planning call so as not to overburden one single leader and to ensure that planning is well informed and efficient. The lead inspector will use the planning call to understand the school's strengths, successes and leaders' priorities. And when inspecting secondary schools, the lead inspector will use your insights and information from their preparation to identify agreed groups of subjects for the learning walks on the morning of day 1. I would stress that we're evaluating learning across a group of subjects to an agreed focus. Typically, one team inspector will use the morning to carry out an inclusion learning walk, gathering initial evidence to enable the team to explore inclusion further in the afternoon. Like our previous methodology, even if one person takes a lead on a theme such as inclusion, all inspectors will contribute to these areas as well through their own evidence. We know from our inspection experience this is important, and it promotes richer discussion in the reflection meetings. It also reflects the structure of the toolkit, with leadership and inclusion woven through every evaluation area. Our focus on foundational knowledge remains, making sure that all pupils have those critical literacy and numeracy skills that are essential for all learning, training and employment. And in schools with sixth forms, inspectors will work with leaders to ensure that post-16 provision is included in each relevant inspection activity. As with now, inspectors will want to understand leaders' rationale for the use of any alternative provision. Inspectors will seek evidence that this is used in the best interest of pupils. And a few more words about the role of the nominee. Schools are invited to nominate a senior member of staff to be the nominee, to support planning, communication and engagement throughout the inspection. Their involvement helps the inspection to run smoothly. And detailed information on this role is available in the school's inspection information documentation. And training will be available for this role if schools wish. It is not compulsory to have a nominee. And as said before, you will not be at any disadvantage if you choose to not nominate someone. Of course, we recognise that in a small school, the nominee may be the head teacher, or you may choose not to have a nominee. And just to reiterate again here, that you will not be disadvantaged if there is no nominee involved in the inspection. So, in summary, our new approach builds on what we know is highly effective evidence gathering activities. However, inspections will look and feel different as we build a more detailed understanding of an individual school's context from the outset. We will be celebrating what school leaders are proud of, validating their reflections, and highlighting with them what their priorities for improvement are. Inspectors will prioritise being out and about around the school site as soon as practicable on day one. And while we are no longer carrying out deep dives, we will carry out learning walks, each with a focus that is based on what has been discussed in the planning calls and rooted in the school's context and leaders' priorities. Inspectors will carry out case sampling to get a detailed understanding of the school's provision for those who are disadvantaged, those with SEND, and those who are vulnerable. And professional discussions, including those in reflection meetings, will be a key part of our new approach. Turning to our report cards, we are bringing together the most popular preferences of parents and professionals by combining separate grades, rating scales, and short summaries into new report cards. The narrative gives a detailed picture of performance, while the 5-point scale offers the clarity and simplicity that parents asked for. We will publish data alongside the inspection report card to illustrate the school context and the performance and attendance data over time, which will be used to inform evaluation grades. The data will differ for each remit, but will be displayed in a consistent design. And at the end of the inspection, the lead inspector will write that report card, which will reflect the evidence gathered, be clear, concise, and focused on what matters most, as informed by the school's context, leaders' evaluation of their school, and the toolkit. It will explain the grade given for each evaluation area and make clear what the school should improve. And it will be consistent with the verbal feedback given to the school at the end of the inspection. So the key message here is that the report card will really capture the most notable features of the school and do so in a way that is truly reflective of your setting and its context. Our post-inspection arrangements regarding report publication are the same as they were under the original EIF. Report cards are sent to the school after moderation, quality assurance and consistency checking. And in most cases, this will be within 18 working days of the end of the inspection. Leaders should share inspection findings with all governors or trustees and whoever else they consider appropriate. However, the information should not be made public or shared with parents until you receive the final report card. And a few words now about our approach to monitoring. We may monitor a school if we have graded any evaluation area as needs attention, if it received a grade of requires improvements for its overall effectiveness or for any key judgment at its last inspection before November 2025, or if we have placed it in a category of concern. The nature and extent of this monitoring will be tailored to the context of the school and the previous inspection findings. Monitoring will focus on supporting schools to reach the expected standard in any evaluation area that we identified as needs attention or urgent improvement. Helen.
Thank you very much, Eleanor. Okay, a little bit about our timeline for change. So as I said earlier, the consultation has been published and you'll find that on gov.uk. And we're going to be hosting a number of engagement events regionally, as well as hosting webinars and attending sector events. All education inspectors are going to complete a very comprehensive training programme to support the transition to the renewed framework before being deployed on a live inspection. And full inspector training materials will continue to be published online via the Ofsted Academy once inspectors have completed the face-to-face training. So that will be at that point when they're ready to go out and be published live. In addition to this training package, Ofsted will undertake pilot visits to volunteer settings, giving inspectors vital experience of full end-to-end inspections before November. These pilot visits will be quality assured by Ofsted's National Director for Education and Principal Inspector. We will resume routine inspections under the renewed framework in November as planned. And during this period, we will maintain urgent inspection and regulatory activities in schools, early years and further education. We will also conduct a series of pilot inspections, giving inspectors the opportunity to gain that deeper understanding of this approach in practice. Standard inspections of independent schools are continuing through the first half of this term to ensure that all schools receive a standard inspection within the current cycle, which began in January 2023. Additional inspections of independent schools will also continue as commissioned by the DfE. Standard inspections for non-association independent schools under the new framework will then begin in January 2026. So when we begin our inspections this November, we're going to do so through what we're calling a steady and assured start. And in order to reassure education providers about the November rollout under the renewed inspection framework, we have set out several measures to support this steady and assured start and have lowered the number of inspections that we do to begin with. We're going to put in place enhanced quality assurance processes, which will see fewer inspections to begin with, led only by our most senior and experienced HMI inspectors, assisted by Ofsted's permanent in-house teams. Part-time external Ofsted inspectors will be phased in following the training. In the autumn term, a random sample of providers will be invited to take part in exit interviews with HMCI, the National Director, and senior Ofsted officials to hear about their inspection experience, and reflect on the implementation of the reforms. HMCI also intends to invite sector representatives to roundtable meetings to share their thoughts on the renewed framework as part of our commitment to transparency and listening to feedback. On occasion, we do receive requests from schools for the deferral of an inspection. During our steady and assured start, all requests for an inspection deferral will be reviewed by Ofsted's Deputy Chief Inspector to make sure each case is treated with the utmost sensitivity and consideration. Our telephone helpline for leaders to raise queries and concerns will be open before, during and after each inspection. And finally, a little bit about measuring impact of the changes that we are making. We will assess how our reforms are working by delivering a programme of evaluation to understand the implementation and impact of our reforms. And the evaluation plan will include various elements, including an externally commissioned evaluation of the renewed inspection framework. And an independent supplier will deliver a baseline study in the summer-autumn of 2025 with some preliminary in-depth qualitative research in the spring 26 and a rolling evaluation survey carried out post-inspection to be continued each year. There's going to be a programme of work to measure our consistency. Some of the questions in the chat were about that. And this includes testing consistency through HMI shadow inspections, a desk-based study using vignettes, and through data that informs the weekly consistency meetings. Further planned evaluation of the changes, such as engagement with parents and carers, providers and inspectors about the implementation of the framework will also be put in place. Okay. So, before we turn to questions, we'd just like to share a quick link to the resources mentioned today. So to find out more about the changes and what they mean for you, you can scan the code. So I'll give colleagues a couple of minutes just to do so. When you scan this, you will find our formal response to the consultation, the toolkits for the different remits, as you can see, and some supporting research and evidence. We've come really to the end of the presentation now, colleagues, and we had before today's webinar, and there's been lots of questions put in the chat, but before today's webinar, we've had lots of questions sent to us, and what we've done is we've tried to group those. The first question, and we've got lots of them in the chat as well, is around some technical questions about what this new framework is going to look like in reality on the ground, what it means for you back in your schools, and some sort of more technical questions about what happens if and what do I do if. So I just want to bring your attention to several documents really. The handbook is gone, as you're probably aware, and in its place are the toolkits. And the toolkits are what we use on inspection in order to make our grades. And I know colleagues on this call took you through what the toolkits look like and how you might access them. The operating guides, I think, are a really good place for you to start. They're about how we inspect, you know, what we do minute by minute throughout the inspection, from the time we call you to the final meetings and what we do afterwards. So the operating guide is a really good place for you to start. Just an inspection information document, which gives you perhaps information that's not in the operating guide or the toolkit. So that's a really additional piece of information for you. And we fully intend to run further webinars, regional events, etc., so that you can come and ask lots of questions of us. I'm going to hand over to John now, who's also going to answer some questions that have come up.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. And we've answered as many questions in the chat as we can, but there are a fair few, so apologies if we didn't get to you. But if I could deal with one question that's come up, which is, what do we need to do to prepare for an inspection? Do we need to do anything differently to prepare for inspection? Now, you'll have heard that the framework is based on that which schools and educational professionals are required to do on statutory and non-statutory guidance on professional standards. So the expectation is not that there is unnecessary additional workload. HMCI has been really clear on that inspection shouldn't bring that, nor that pupils or children should be asked to do anything differently or have different lessons on inspections. That's not what we would want. It would, as Helen has said, be a really useful thing to do, to look at the toolkits, the operating guide and the inspection information documents. But inspectors are coming in to celebrate, validate, highlight your work, what it's typically like to be a pupil at your school. And that's what we would like to see. And just going back to what HMCI said, not doing anything in addition for the days that our inspectors come into your schools. I think that's all I've got to say, Helen, unless there's anything else you would like to add on that particular one.
No, thank you, John. That's really helpful. Gom, are you going to say something else?
Yeah, I was just going to say, just hand over to Eleanor, because Eleanor, there's been questions in the chat about context, but there's also been a fair few questions that came in before about context, and we've tried to group together those and provide an answer. Can I hand over to you, please?
Absolutely, thanks, John. So yeah, some of the questions about how context would be taken into account, but particularly around achievement and some concern about the absence of progress data, and what's our view on that? So under the renewed framework, we'll continue to hold providers to the same standards, obviously, but inspections will be better informed by your context. So though our expectations would be the same for all schools, that because standards matter just as much for children in disadvantaged communities as they do in those more affluent areas. But we want to really accurately identify and acknowledge those schools that are achieving particular success under challenging circumstances, so that others can learn from them. And the changes that we've talked through, that we're introducing, will help ensure that our findings are grounded in that clear understanding of your unique circumstances. We've talked through how inspectors will use that planning call to understand your context. And that will include pupils' needs, their capabilities, and of course the barriers that they may face. And of course, we'll want to hear your evaluation of your strengths and the areas for improvement that you're working on. And as for data, it's a starting point for understanding context, but inspectors will triangulate that data where available, pre-inspection materials such as the IDSR, but with other evidence that we gather on inspection. And we fully understand the limitations of data, and we know how to interpret contextual factors. It needs nuance. And we've had a lot of training and a lot of thought given over to this to ensure that this approach will also support consistency. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor. There's so many questions in the chat, colleagues, and I'm conscious that we've only got less than approximately 2 minutes left. To reassure colleagues, if you are a school causing concern at the moment, you'll be in a monitoring programme, and that monitoring programme will continue. So whoever the HMI is that you currently talk to, they're probably the best people to tell you when your next monitoring inspection will happen. The current framework will officially finish before the new one starts. So they won't be running it tandem. We're not going to have sort of legacy EIF running with the renewed framework. So when we start those the renewed framework in November, that's the sort of cutoff point for the new renewed framework running. I'm conscious that we've got literally 2 minutes left. Is there anything that Eleanor or John want to pick out of the huge... Oh, just to say, colleagues, extremely excited to see so many of you are keen to be a nominee. We think being the nominee, it's worked really well on further education and skills inspections. And Eleanor's smiling because she's one of the sort of main creators of this role of the nominee. So if you're keen to be a nominee, more information will come out about that soon. I've actually been on a pilot inspections day yesterday, and it was a joy to spend quite considerable time actually with the nominee, helping us to navigate their school. They know their school very well, and help the team to navigate the inspection process. So I'm really pleased to see so many of you are keen to be nominees. Okay, any last minute thoughts from John or Eleanor before we formally close this afternoon?
Just to thank colleagues for their attendance in what is a busy working day. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you,
Likewise.
John. So, colleagues, thank you very much for listening this afternoon. I hope you found it useful. Please go away, have a look at these documents, digest them, and keep an eye out for other events such as this where you can find out more. Thank you very much for your time. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.